Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for joining us today. My name is John Benninger. I'm Vice President and Market Leader for our supply side business here at Informa. And we really appreciate you coming out to SupplySide East. We had our first show in 1999, and it seems like yesterday, but here we are. And what a wonderful journey it's been, and we thank all of you for that. This session we've been looking forward to, very important. As an industry, our partner in bringing safe, effective, quality products to market is the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. And it's really important, the work that they do and the work that we do together with them in order to ensure that we deliver on that promise to consumers, to give them great products. That's what they want. So today I'm going to make a couple of opening remarks, but then we're going to have Dr. Kara Welch, the Director of the Office of Dietary Supplement Programs within the Center for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition, CFSAN, at the Food and Drug Administration, going to give a presentation and some comments. We'll have a chance for some Q&A. And actually, let me advance this right here real quick. That QR code there, if you haven't already done it, if you take your phone right now and scan it, that's going to allow you to submit questions at any time while we're up here today. And then those will come to me, and then I get to decide which questions to ask. But go ahead and ask questions. You can also see what other questions other people are asking, and you can like them if you want to bump them up to the top or something like that. So it's kind of fun. But go ahead and scan that. That's also where you're going to give us some feedback at the end of the session. We'll just ask you to take a quick survey. That helps us improve. And once you've all completed that survey, 100% compliance, then we'll unlock the doors and you'll be able to leave. No, it's not quite that serious, but we do appreciate your input. Yeah, a couple of announcements. Obviously, the trade show floor is out there. If you're not already on the Wi-Fi, it's SupplySide East 24. Then the password is Ingredients Online. Expo Hall is open until 3:30 today. If you haven't taken advantage, a new thing that people are liking, we have what we're calling the Headshot Lounge in booth 148, where we have a professional photographer, and you can go get a headshot for you to use for your social media or whatever other purposes. It's a cool service, so take advantage of that. We already passed the bagels and bubbly brunch. Hopefully you enjoyed that. And we had a great networking reception with Women in Nutraceuticals. We're a big supporter, and if you're not a member, we would encourage you to consider becoming a member of Women in Nutraceuticals. So let's get started. As I said, we have Dr. Kara Welch, Director of the Office of Dietary Supplement Programs at FDA, going to give us some updates. And then after that, we'll have a couple of questions from those you submit through the app. And then I'm going to bring up a couple of panelists I'm real excited to have here who are in the front row right now. Larissa Pavlik is Regulatory Program Manager for us at Informa Markets and has been in the industry at a number of important organizations, including CHPA, UNPA, and formerly FDA. So that'll be some good perspective to have. And then, of course, Russ Michelson, Regulatory and Safety Strategy Lead for Food Supplements at Reckitt, the very large company Reckitt. You may not know the name Reckitt, hopefully you do, but you know their products, I guarantee it, whether it's dietary supplements or some of the biggest consumer brands on the market. And we'll just have a little discussion about some of the topics that are important right now. But I'm going to get out of the way and hand it over to Dr. Welch so that we can hear what FDA has to say, and we'll go from there.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I saw on the schedule that I missed the bagels and bubbly, but hopefully everyone kept it cool. Q&A, we're gonna remember it gets filtered through John. My name is Kara Welch. I am the Director of FDA's Office of Dietary Supplement Programs. I am very happy to be here today. I was here last year, and apparently I did not do so horribly, and they welcomed me back. I'm going to talk today about our office, ODSP, Office of Dietary Supplement Programs, sort of our remit and our priorities. But to give you an idea of who we are, and I may refer to us as a program office. That is sort of an inside term, but we have sort of a distinct program, and so we refer to ourselves as the program office. We, at a high level, set the policies and priorities for the dietary supplement oversight activities across the agency. We don't do a lot of the activities, but we're sort of setting the policies, working with the people who are implementing the activities. A lot of my staff work on scientific, technical, and policy reviews. That would be reviewing new dietary ingredient notifications, manufacturing practices, GMP inspections, labeling, claims, the safety of products. As a whole, we refer to those generally scientific, technical, and policy reviews. And then, as I mentioned, a lot of the activity isn't necessarily done by my office, or I should say the activity that you all see. So, warning letters, enforcement actions, those are import activities. Those are all carried out by our partners across the agency. So when we look at the regulatory framework for dietary supplements, by and large, we're sort of set up with pretty heavily on the post-market side of the story. And obviously, I'm setting up here for a story. So the pre-market side of the house, we really have limited pre-market authority, insight, and that's really just through the new dietary ingredient notification program. Because of that, it's a really important aspect to our activities. That's our only opportunity to see the safety of new ingredients before they end up in a dietary supplement. On the post-market side of the house, that's where we have a lot of our activities. It's a lot of our surveillance is filtered through the post-market side. Facility inspections are a great opportunity to understand what is happening in a facility, what types of products are being manufactured, what types of ingredients, what types of claims. So the GMPs are good manufacturing practices. Those are the sort of quality manufacturing requirements. Dietary supplement labeling requirements. We don't see the labels before they're put out onto a product. There is a requirement on claims, structure function claims. There is a requirement to notify FDA within 30 days of marketing a product containing that claim. So that would also be post-market, obviously. And then adverse event report review. Again, a huge area of insight for our program. Adverse event reports, I'm sure you all know this, they are required to be submitted by manufacturers when their product is associated with a serious adverse event. But anyone can submit an adverse event report associated with a dietary supplement. Healthcare providers, consumers, consumer friends. And so they give us insight into what might be happening when a consumer is taking that product. And so all of these post-market activities sort of fall into our surveillance. And as I mentioned before, our office really is looking at the entire dietary supplement marketplace, and so there's obviously a lot to do, right? And so we have to have priorities. We refer a lot to our strategic priorities, sort of our overarching, how do we organize our activities? First and foremost, always, we are a public health agency, so protecting consumers, consumer safety is always going to be our top priority. That's going to reorganize our priorities when something comes in the door. I'm going to get to that here in a second. Product integrity. So what do we mean by product integrity? Basically, the product is what it says it is and nothing else. A lot of the product integrity work is probably going to be GMPs and the labeling type of thing. And then informed decision making. This is the idea of ensuring consumers have the information they need, healthcare providers have the information they need to make an informed decision about the products that they're choosing to take. Dietary supplements are not prescribed, right? And so it is someone sort of making this decision when they're walking through the aisle or scrolling through the internet aisle, I guess, about the products that they fit, right? It's very much a self-care. It's an important part of the self-care regimen. So ensuring that they have the information they need to make the decision about their products. Sort of shifting over to the activities where we're spending our time. Obviously, again, protecting consumers is going to be sort of our top activity. We've been spending a lot of time on strengthening the regulation of NDIs. NDIs are new dietary ingredients. We've had a couple guidances, a final guidance and a draft guidance published in recent weeks, and that's sort of building a framework to get us to the point where we can strengthen that regulation. Ensuring high quality, properly labeled dietary supplement marketplace. GMPs is always going to be an area where we spend a fair bit of time, and where you're going to see a number of our sort of very serious enforcement actions, like an injunction, are going to generally be based on GMPs and claims. And then stakeholder engagement is a real priority for our office, but also for our foods program at FDA. Ensuring that we have, I guess, sort of informed decision-making internally, ensuring that we have information from our stakeholders, all of our stakeholders, to direct our priorities and direct our activities. This is not just industry relationships, though these events are really important. It's the relationship with trade groups, it's the relationship with consumer advocates, healthcare providers, ensuring we have sort of open lines of communication and can understand what's important to them to see if that can inform our priorities as well. So a lot of our activity for protecting consumers, we try to get the message directly to consumers. So I mentioned earlier sort of reorganizing our priorities. There are times when a problem comes up and we really need to, devote attention to getting X product off the market. We've had a problem with some products recently. By and large, these are not going to be products that you all are hopefully familiar with, but there have been some weight loss products that are unfortunately substituted, not containing the Nuez de la India or tejocote root, Mexican hawthorn. Instead, they were actually yellow oleander, which can be quite toxic, has cardiac glycosides. The issue first came about with some adverse events, unfortunately. With one of our state partners, they brought the matter to our attention, and we started with the Nuez de la India alert. And then CDC was doing some work, and well, again, I think that was actually New Jersey, was working and had identified some adulterated products, and so CDC published an MMWR, mortality, morbidity weekly report. I apologize for using that acronym, not knowing what it means. They published a report about products. This is the Mexican hawthorn products being substituted with yellow oleander, and that's now expanded. I think we're at 30 products we've sampled, 25 were found to be the wrong botanical, so it's really scary stuff. But again, in these types of situations, we need to get the message directly to consumers so that they can stop taking it, which is the most important thing. Health fraud scams and health fraud alerts. Again, these are products that are not actually dietary supplements, but they end up sort of hurting the reputation of the legitimate marketplace. So FDA does spend a fair bit of time sampling products, identifying products, testing them, and then when they are found to, in this case, this database is tainted products, so products tainted with an active pharmaceutical ingredient. Getting it on the website and sort of calling out these firms. If we can find responsible parties, we will sort of follow up on that and seize products, remove them from the market, take other enforcement actions. Problem is, a lot of these firms aren't set up the way you all are set up, right? There's not an entity, there's not a business, there's not someone a location even that we can go to. They're operating out of a garage or something concerning along those lines. We've also been struggling with a substance, again, not a legitimate dietary supplement, but tianeptine. And so this is a concerning product. It has some opioid use disorder ties, really concerning adverse event reports, sometimes associated with tianeptine or other adulterants, so it's even worse than not just having the illegal substance, it's now contaminated with another illegal substance. And so we've really tried to step up our communication that this is just outright a scam. We also, at times, try to sort of amplify our messaging. Claims is going to be an area where we are fairly active. There's a lot of claims that are allowed for dietary supplements, which sort of begs people to go too far and make inappropriate claims. And so This is an area where we often spend a lot of our activities. We have been trying to sort of package together a number of letters. One of these situations, I think some of the cardiovascular disease claims possibly, at times we will partner with FTC. Federal Trade Commission, of course, also has some activity in claims or advertising for them to amplify the messaging. Shifting focus. New dietary ingredient notifications. The requirement has been in place, well, since DSHEA. The final rule was established in 1997. I can't do that math, but 27 years. We've received about 1,300 notifications. I know there's a lot to unpack on this slide, and what I'm actually going to focus on is we usually only receive somewhere between 40 and 50 new dietary ingredient notifications a year. So I know people really want to sort of pick apart the data. It's hard to do that when you only have 40 or so notifications a year. You get a spike, and it's going to skew the data. And so we do our best with the information we have. I think over the last few years, we have seen sort of an increase in the percent of acknowledgement letters, which for our purposes is a good day letter, for your purposes as well is a good day letter. So I am really encouraged about that. When we run the numbers, that blue bar at the bottom, this is the last 5 years, by the way. That blue bar at the bottom, percentage-wise, we're seeing an increase. Is that a true increase? I don't know. We're going to keep watching it. But what I really want to focus on is the other. Is this also a poker, like a shiner? No, I don't think so. The other one, the purple and blue chart, is talking about response letters with a pre-notification meeting, a pre-NDIN meeting, or those without a pre-NDIN meeting. And so it's for the same time frame, but now that column, sorry, it turns out I need the lav mic. That far left column is the purple bar is the percentage of good day letters that had a pre-NDIN meeting in this 5-year time frame versus those that did not have a pre-NDIN meeting. And so what hopefully we can support here is early and often communication with FDA seems to trend to a good response. And we really want to encourage that. Having these discussions with FDA is hopefully beneficial for the people who are having the discussion, the firm who's looking to submit an NDI notification. But it's also important for us. It's helpful on our end because that gets us sort of prepared for this notification before it comes in. We have 75 days to review a notification, and they're pretty substantive notifications. And so really trying to get through all the questions that we're trying to answer in that 75 days, calendar days, not business, is tough. And so having the communication with notifiers even before they submit seems to be beneficial for both parties. I mentioned about strengthening the regulation and sort of building a framework on which we can support that stronger regulation. Part of this framework involves the new dietary ingredient notification guidances. This is something I have had the pleasure of talking about my entire time at FDA, but we have an overall guidance, a draft guidance on new dietary ingredient notifications. It covers really soup to nuts. And so it's quite a long document. It's 102 pages. We published the draft in 2011. We published a revised draft in 2016. And then we realized it's going to be really difficult to update this very large document every time we need to make a change. So we're breaking it up into sections. We just recently published the first section of that guidance as a final guidance, which I think the only exciting part about this guidance is that it's the first final guidance, and hopefully it's the start of more. It is on procedures and timeframes, and I shouldn't say it's not exciting, but it is important to sort of get an idea of what are you sorry, I'm looking at the time. What are you what are you expecting when you submit a notification? What type of information do you need? How do you use the electronic portal? What kind of correspondence can you expect from the FDA? Hopefully sort of getting people comfortable with the general idea of submitting notifications so that they'll submit more. And then we also published a draft guidance on master files for NDINs. This is a draft guidance. First off, this is a draft guidance because the revised draft guidance had a few references to master files, but it didn't really provide sort of substance on those references. And we had some interaction with our stakeholders, our industry stakeholders, saying, we want more on master files. We want to understand how to use them. We want to understand how to submit them. We want a guidance just on master files. So here you go. This is our draft guidance. This is our sort of proposal to our stakeholders. This is what we think for a master file program, master files for NDINs. And there's a lot in there that would be new to our stakeholders. So I really hope people are taking the opportunity to read this draft guidance, putting together comments. That's going to be very helpful for us as we sort of prepare for finalizing that guidance. It's a proposal at this point, but having that feedback is very important. GMPs, again, shifting focus to GMPs and facility inspections. Again, there's probably a fair bit that we could unpack from the chart, but what I think we want to take away from this is, well, it's difficult when we have a full year and then a portion of a year, but our facility inspections took a hit. The number of facility inspections we can do in a year took a hit with COVID, much like everything else. We really think that we've gotten back to the pre-COVID numbers, and we should be running about 500 inspections a year. The last number with an asterisk on it is because it's only a portion of a year, which, you know, halfway through the year, bar's about halfway up. So I'm really hoping that we are back to that consistent pre-COVID numbers. We do, of course, have GMP violations that are sort of repeat offenders. What we often see issues, these are the top observations since FY17. Again, you can look at the sites at the bottom, but they are generally focused on specifications. The biggest bar is 21 CFR 11170E, that's finished product specifications. Then we have quality control with 103, 553, 453. I think those are return product. A lot of quality control in there. And then we have ingredient specs about halfway down. But we continue to see observations with what I would consider to be the basics, the essential aspects of GMPs. And so I think this is an area where we just need to continue to work on. How do we sort of get the message out to industry members? What is necessary for an adequate specification, documenting the quality control requirement, responsibilities, and then the testing. Repeated noncompliance for GMPs generally progresses to an injunction. And so this slide is demonstrating some of the injunctions that we've done in the last 3 years. Not for any particular reason, but we did have 2 that were already signed and implemented in 2024. That's not to say we're going to end up the year with 4. I'm just saying we already had 2 this year. These are really resource-intensive actions, but they are really important to reinforce quality manufacturing. Informed decision-making, this is going to be a lot of our transparency efforts. This is an ingredient directory. We rolled it out a little over a year ago. The reaction was admittedly not great, but that's an opportunity for us to learn. So we heard some of the comments and the constructive criticism and went out with a second shot. I think we're getting there and we're improving every step of the way. And then continuing to sort of get this stakeholder interaction is really important to us. I've already hit on pre-NDIN meetings. comments right on draft guidances, and all of this sort of leads to meaningful engagement. These conferences, these events are a great opportunity to engage with the entire breadth of the industry, and so I really appreciate being here today. I do have a slide, I guess. I'm sorry, this is not my slide deck, I apologize, on the Human Foods Program reorg. And I think we're going to talk about this, so I'm actually going to sort of speed right on through this. This is a chart that is on our website, FDA's website. We are undertaking a proposal for a massive reorganization of the foods program. It's not renaming the boxes. It is sort of blowing apart a few different structures and rebuilding something that we think works best for the foods program. The yellow box in the middle, that is where my office will sit. We will continue to be an office. It's just we'll be an office within that office. And again, I think I'm going to get an opportunity to talk more about that in a bit. We're going to speed right on through that. Thank you very much.
Check. There we are. All right, thank you. So we have some questions coming in. I also want to put up the slide that had that QR code on it. So if somebody didn't scan it, there you go. If you have a question or something, scan that. There's also a couple of polls we're going to ask you to complete. One of them I think is already open, but we'll do that a little bit later. There was a question which you answered in one of your slides. How many GMP facilities does the FDA estimate it audits annually? Which you've answered already, but I want to maybe go with the next question on that comes to my mind is that number in the FDA's view, in your view, adequate to ensure a quality, safe marketplace? And if not, how big a number would you like that to be if it were possible? How many inspections a year to really say we got it covered?
I don't have the answer to the second part of that. I wish I did. And I'm going to be pretty blunt and say no. I don't think the number we have right now is adequate. And that comes down to just plain limitations in so many ways. I don't know what the right number is at this point. I think we have 10,000 facilities that we're aware of. That's probably a low number. We do about 500 inspections a year. That's not enough. And that's not always new facilities, right? That doesn't count the repeat inspections, the for-cause inspections. But we are part of the foods program, and so the foods program as a whole is dealing with all food facilities and all the different factors that go into that. So I think dietary supplements has done well in that sense. We have been supported, but what we need to do is we need to be very strategic in what facilities we're inspecting, why we're inspecting, how can we make the most of those resources.
Thank you. Another question that was submitted is on the new dietary ingredient master files. How much and what kind of information will companies be allowed to keep private under that when they file?
Great question. Honestly, the same as what would be part of a new dietary ingredient notification. It does a master file program like what we proposed in that draft guidance carries no special authorities with it. So if the information is trade secret or CCI, confidential company information, really sorry if I just messed that up, then FDA is not at liberty to share that, and so we would have to redact it. But it doesn't get any special privileges for protective information.
Thanks. Just a couple more, and then we're going to pivot and bring up the panelists and have a discussion here. Let's see here. I just had it. Where is it? There's always a cannabis question, right? It just moved. This is a new app for me. If cannabis were to be fully decriminalized at the federal level, would that change FDA's view on CBD regulation?
No, it would not. No. There's a lot wrapped up in that question, and I'm not going to answer any of the contextual information that was provided with it. But our position on CBD had nothing to do with the criminalization of cannabis. It was only CBD was authorized for investigation and ultimately approved as a new drug before it was ever marketed as a food or a dietary supplement.
Thank you. I just love to hear cannabis questions that have the word wrapped up and cannabis in them at the same time. I just think it's funny. Sorry.
Puns always intended.
Yeah. You have to have fun with it. Let's see. We have a polling question up also, and you can do this at any time. There are 2 polls, and we're interested in what you think. So the first one was about collaboration between industry and FDA. This one's about FDA resources and needs for more and that sort of thing. So please answer that. I'm going to go ahead and invite my panelists up right now. We have Larissa Pavlik. Well, let's all take a seat. That'll be easier. Yeah, wherever you want. Perfect. And Russ Michelson. And when the music stops, take a seat. Okay. And we'll continue to pepper in your questions here, so keep them coming in. I'm watching my phone. If you have something that you think of, put it in there, and we'll try to get to it. But first, I want to welcome my panelists, Russ and Larissa. Thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Dr. Welch, for the presentation. It's always really a privilege to have FDA here. We appreciate you making the time to be here for industry. So I want to start out, Russ, you're closest to me. I'll just kick it to you. I'm sure the presentation may have stimulated some questions, or maybe some things you were thinking about that weren't in the presentation. I'd just love to give you a chance to ask away or make a comment.
No, for sure. So first of all, thank you for having me. Thank you, Dr. Welch. As sort of the representative here of a finished product manufacturer, right, branded products, obviously the NDI conversation is a significant one, but I think for me, as an industry, we're going to get there, right? We've got partners with suppliers and trade associations and FDA through the partnership. So there will be, I'm sure, some conversation on that. But the thing that keeps me up at night is some of the stuff that's actually happening internationally that is impacting what we do here in the US. So as a globally responsible regulatory lead, I'm constantly monitoring what's happening internationally. And a lot of what's happening in Europe, for example, and I know Dr. Califf just returned from a trip to Europe. He just posted something, I think, a day ago, talking about food safety and food chemicals, as you guys referred to it. Maybe food additives or excipients would be the word we would use. But one of the things that's happening in Europe now is they're actually looking at putting some limitations on the use of vitamins and minerals at certain levels in food supplements, something that's very concerning to the global industry, and the impact of Europe is massive globally, and we see that trickle here to the US. So something I definitely encourage people to be monitoring what that might translate to. But given Dr. Califf's recent presentation that he posted on the website, I'm curious, from a dietary supplement standpoint, what does sort of international relationships from regulator to regulator look like? Another example would be what just happened in Japan with red yeast rice, a massive recall, very unfortunate situation. How does ODSP, how does FDA interact with these regulators? How does it influence your sort of day-to-day discussions on policy, on things that might influence what the dietary supplement industry would do?
Yeah, so I think firms that have an international presence, kudos to all of you for trying to understand the different systems. And I think that's important to clarify, right? The systems are all slightly different. We use different terminologies, we define things differently, we have different safety standards, and that sort of overarching clarification is important. Because I truly believe that I think our agency and other agencies, we're trying to follow the science, but we need to follow the science as it fits in our legal construct and our policies as well. And so there's a lot at stake. International relationships are really important to us. I think our international counterparts are important stakeholders. And we try to keep open lines of communication with them. FDA has offices in Europe, Latin America, China, and India. And those locations were chosen strategically to make sure that we can have good relationships with our international counterparts. So there, I think the part on your first question, we try to keep that line of communication open and understanding what is happening in other countries. But ultimately, they are making the decision for their commodity, and we make our decision for our commodity. And it is unfortunate when the situations don't align, but I'd like to think that that's for a reason on one end or the other. And I am sorry for everyone who has to sort of navigate that line. It's a little bit winding sometimes. On the second, I've now lost the second question. I'm sorry.
No, it's really from a dietary supplement standpoint. If there's any specific interactions you have, right? There's limitations on vitamins and minerals potentially being proposed. Does FDA take that into any consideration, or sort of your answer basically address that? Europe's got a different approach to how they monitor the supplement and regulate the supplement space and the food space. Mm-hmm. And I'll follow up with another question maybe later on some other aspects of that translate differently. But I think that was really the gist. It's just really understanding how you might be influenced by what's happening globally, or really where FDA would stand on its own based on the environment we've built here, a very robust and relatively safe dietary supplement industry here that we're all thriving in. And I think FDA gives us an opportunity to do that. So I think you've pretty much answered the gist of it. My second question will be on a different angle that'll tee you up later.
I'm going to flag the Japan comment.
Sure.
Not comment, the note that you had in there. I think that's a great example of sort of keeping that line of communication open and ensuring, different countries are aware of particular product that might have been problematic, and sort of following the supply chain, because we have a global supply chain now, right? Cannot avoid it. And so having country-to-country communication is helpful to understand, is any of this implicated product in our marketplace? And for the record, we don't believe there is, and that's great. Definitely want to keep it that way. And understanding, how can we aid other countries' efforts? How can they aid ours? But yes, it's a tough situation to understand the different structures. They're all slightly different. I think they probably all have pros and cons, including our own. So.
And I think just the context for that is I'm trying to protect my business from what might be coming, what FDA might be influencing regulatory changes, and reading the tea leaves from these other markets is one of those things. And again, that'll tee up maybe my second comment in a bit.
Thanks, Russ.
Thank you.
Larissa, what's on your mind from the... All right.
What's on my mind? So I have been following GMP numbers for my entire career. So 27 years. I actually have binders that I've kept over time of the number of inspections and how those have increased. So Kara and I have typically bantered back and forth about those numbers. So with GMPs, we see that the food numbers, so anyone with an ingredient would be under food regulations, and anyone with dietary supplements also has their own numbers. Sometimes the dietary supplement numbers are difficult to find when we use the FDA database, but Kara has provided those for us today. So it looks like with food numbers and dietary supplement numbers, we're almost to pre-pandemic levels. We have, if we compare 2019 as before everything really started melting down, and then go back to 2023 when we had our final numbers, we're right about the same. One of the, I think for me, interesting topics is if you look at the classification for inspections for OAI, which is official action indicated, kind of the red bar of most graphs where it shows where FDA needs to step in because a firm does not have the ability to, or maybe might not have the ability to, or is not willing and able to move themselves into compliance. That number has doubled over those 2 years. So we've kind of talked about it. The number is looking at food numbers, so ingredients. I don't think we were able to come to any conclusions of what caused that, but kind of wanting industry to be aware. Our VAI numbers, voluntary action indicated, meaning usually a 483 has been issued, but the firm has the ability and willingness to move themselves into compliance. That has dropped a bit, but it's just interesting, I think, to consider the doubling of OAI. And then kind of moving into that is you showed the top 10 citations. I also have like graphs going back to 2009. Showing those changes
but they haven't
as well.
Changed.
They haven't changed. They did change in let's see, 2017 we had a shift of 1, 2, 3, but they've always been the same between 1 and 10. So we can make some huge improvements there. But one thing I think for industry to recognize and understand, and maybe you can comment a bit on, is FSVP. foreign supplier verification program. So anyone importing, which Russ had brought into view, that has moved into the top 10 for all foods, actually all citations for FDA overall in their 483s. But what could we add to that to support the foreign suppliers and the importation of ingredients and or dietary supplements? And I think making a clarification on how dietary supplements might fit into that.
Yeah, so FSVP it's a relatively new area for our inspectorate and for our inspections. And I think what we have learned, I'm not even going to say when we learned it, but I think what we know at FDA is the idea of educating and not just regulating, right? And the regulate, I don't like that phrase, I'm sorry, educate before you regulate, because even regulatory is not always bad. And so sort of taking the opportunity and walking with firms and pointing out problems. There's a lot of emphasis on the education side of things, but eventually we do get to the point where we are inspecting firms and noting violations and maybe following up on them. And so I think all new inspection programs go through this hopefully growing pains, where we're all coming to the situation of how we interpret compliance with a certain provision, and understanding what is necessary to be compliant with a provision. I don't know all the details on the types of violations. So FSVP for dietary supplements, for the record, is they have modified requirements, and so there are, depending on if you manufacture, if your foreign supplier manufactures the supplement, or if you're importing a finished supplement. And so that wasn't quite right, but you know what I mean. There are different levels of modified requirements. And I think that's important to keep in mind, because even while we are educating on FSVP as a whole, now maybe we also have to work in the specific supplement modified requirements and ensuring we understand probably both sides of that, we being you and us, understanding what is necessary for compliance on the modified requirements as well.
Could I build on that, because it was something that I think we both wrote down. You'd mentioned you're auditing about 500 facilities at approximately 10,000, so you're talking 5%. That's been the number that's generally been out there, so it's not new news. But I know from an industry standpoint, one of the discussions that's been happening around DSHEA modernization, or 2.0, whatever we're calling it now, has been the potential, and it falls under FSVP a little bit, is the sort of a third-party accreditation of GMP auditors, right? As a manufacturer, we're constantly audited by third-party auditors, many of whom may be in the room. But under FSVP, there are some accredited auditors that sort of audit on behalf of FDA, kind of spread their network, and it's a way to raise the bar and raise your reach. What are your current thoughts on whether that would benefit FDA, benefit the consumer, benefit the industry, if we were able to work out a system where the network was spread and the 5% became 10%, 15, 20? What are your current thoughts as we go into some of the DSHEA modernization work this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's necessary to explore what can we do, because I already said, my blunt answer is, do we have enough to have a good picture? I don't think we do. So what can we do to use our resources in the best possible way, and maybe also to use external resources? That said, I think the devil's in the details. What do we mean when we say third-party accredited? What do we mean when we say audit versus inspection? What level of importance is the audit report going to carry with FDA? For the record, we don't audit, we inspect, right? And that carries a level of importance with it. How does that affect the inspection requirements under FSMA, that we inspect high-risk facilities this frequency and non-high-risk facilities this frequency? all the details even beyond what I have already listed off. And so that said, I should say, that said, it is important for us to explore what is possible. I'd love to see more engagement from the supplement industry in the third-party accredited program. I will throw that out there. There are accreditation bodies or certifying bodies. There are both for supplements. And it would be great to see how that is helping the industry. Is industry using it? Are there going to be more? Is industry all in on this too?
Yeah, it's interesting. I look at what it's done for the organic sector in particular with USDA and having non-USDA, non-government, but accredited inspectors. And now we have these beautiful green labels that say USDA organic that give consumers confidence and good confidence. I would love to see a label that says FDA GMP on it. After it's been inspected.
I mean, you can
by
find
a third
labels
party.
that say that. They're
There's
just not
plenty of them
legitimate.
out there, but I would like it to be a legit one. Okay. So yeah, interesting idea. I have more questions coming in, but I don't want to jump in the way of the discussion. So if you have something else, dive in. There's a interesting question here. I think I know the answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Does the FDA plan to assist compliant companies in enforcing against non-compliant companies? Historically, compliant companies are at a disadvantage in the marketplace because of their increased costs tied to complying and making legal and validated claims.
Yes, we do plan to enforce on non-compliant companies. I feel like there's some context I'm missing on that question. So we'll just leave it with that.
Maybe not enough enforcement is the context I'm hearing, and maybe that's being implied.
So there's a lot that goes into deciding what firms what level of activity is applied to which firms and which products. And we cannot be led by the loudest voice, right? We have to be led by any number of factors. And we try to keep these factors top of mind, including our resources, what is FDA able to do on our own, what do we have to work through the Department of Justice for, and then once we're working through the Department of Justice, by the way, we have to work through the Department of Justice on any litigation, or like seizures and enforcements. Those are all through the Department of Justice. So then we're dealing with their priorities and their resources as well. So there is a lot wrapped up in the determination of which activity and which level of activity, which violations and which level of activity is needed. I think we would all like to do more, yes, and we would like to be very strategic in how we are. I think someone needs to be taught about the app. I think we need to be very strategic in how we use our resources and how do we set up the agency best to know how to use those resources best.
That's great. I'll be right to you, Russ. One of the poll questions that we have, and I see a number of you have answered already, and please, we want your answers, is which of these statements do you agree with? And you can select more than one if you want. And the choices are FDA needs more authority to effectively regulate supplements. FDA needs more tools to effectively regulate supplements. FDA needs more budgeting or funding to effectively regulate supplements. Or the final choice, FDA has all the authority, tools, and funding it needs to effectively regulate supplements. So please, if you get a chance on the app, fill that out and we can see what y'all think. But Russ, go ahead.
No, I think the way I heard that question as somebody who works for one of those, bigger, more compliant companies, and I see a lot of regulatory legal faces here, I think some of it maybe comes from a place of frustration where it's like, we know something bad when we see it. We've been in this industry, we represent our products well. And so the voice may be like, can we do more to put stuff onto your radar when we see stuff that we just know as a compliant, robust company that we're just like, this is something that should be on your radar. I try to do that on Instagram when I see all these ads and they never block anything, but you see stuff promoting disease prevention or better than this drug. And I'm like, oh, I wish I could report that, and that's on the platform. But I read that question, I interpreted that question as almost a frustration of, it's so obvious when something's wrong. We wish we could do something ourselves. Is there any chance of an avenue when we see something that's justifiably wrong, we bring it to your attention? But then it could become, like you said, just the loudest voice or the person that pushes the most through. I don't know whether there ever could be a feasible mechanism, but I get the impression that's part of where that question came from.
So that's very helpful. Thank you. I would say, sort of following up on Russ's comments, having that information come in is very helpful. But it can't just be, this person is doing something wrong. We need to understand the data behind what you're saying. So, I have evidence that they are adulterating their product. We'd love to see the evidence. We cannot take action based on information that's just handed to us. We would need to replicate it, most certainly. And so, but understanding what your assertion might be based on is really helpful to our determination of, do we follow up on this report, or that report? Maybe we understand the science behind that one, and so that's the one that we send forward first. And these wait until we have more information to understand what is happening with this complaint.
In the case of the prominent brand in the industry, Now Foods has been receiving a lot of media in the industry, and I think even outside the industry, for some of their work where they've been just purchasing products on Amazon, maybe other places, and then having them tested, and they've uncovered some pretty rough stuff, like just really bad stuff that's out there in the marketplace, and it's public knowledge, at least what they're reporting and all that. Is that the type of thing that would help FDA, or that FDA would lean into and maybe pursue? Should more companies and more organizations in our industry do things like that, like go out and do some testing and gather some data and provide it, or is that not really useful in the long run for FDA?
So we're also aware of the reports, right? They're publicly posted, but we need to understand what's behind it, right? And so, what
Amazon.
method was used? What method was used? Do we understand the methodology? Is it a dosage form question? We internally have been exploring gummies and the challenges that gummy format can have on finished product analysis. And the studies that have been posted about gummies, can we believe them? Do we think that they're scientifically valid? And so sometimes we need a bit more information about the methodology. We probably still need to replicate it on our own. And so, do we have data on X firm or Y product? Is there an inspection coming up? We might flag it for, an inspection that is planned for this year or next year. Is there we refer to them as sampling assignments, and I'm sorry, that's where we go out and we sample products and test them. Do we have, and obviously it's all about numbers, right? And so we get allocated X number of samples, and is that where we want to spend our samples, is on following up on this complaint or that complaint? And what do we think has the biggest impact on public health, but also the integrity of the marketplace and the sort of ripple effects, right? Is there a chilling effect when we have a problem with, the firm doesn't need to, they get the impression that they don't need to comply with the labeled amounts on the label. That can have a chilling effect across the industry. We don't want to see that. And so there are a number of factors that go into how we follow up on those types of reports.
Thanks. Russ?
I've got one more question, because I did promise you an FDA reorg question. But to tee that up, right, another international storyline back to the food additives is some of the stuff that's happening in Europe is translating to bans of common food additives or excipients. Here in the US, titanium dioxide is one where it's FDA's put out their statement, but the states are doing their activity. There's silicon dioxide, there's synthetic colors, there's sweeteners. All these things are happening at an international level, coming here, landing sort of at the state legislation level, and then eventually maybe FDA gets around to looking at it through a citizen's petition, or as you evaluate your safety priorities of these ingredients. As part of the new restructure, and I have not memorized the name of your group, so I wrote it down, your office is now part of Office of Food Chemical Safety, Dietary Supplements, and Innovation. Because this is food chemical safety or food additive safety, Do you envision where Office of Dietary Supplements may be involved in some of these food additive discussions, some efficiencies being created within FDA, where the voice of dietary supplements are at the table when it comes to some of these very important and critical ingredients that make up a lot of the products that we're offering to consumers?
Yeah, so I think, and that's a nice way to circle back to the reorg. I think there are some really exciting aspects about the foods program reorganization proposal, and one is exactly that, integrating supplements program more tightly with the foods program, because we are a category of foods. Food chemicals is broader than food additives, just to be clear. Food chemicals would be really all of the ingredients, active, added, purposefully added, obviously the additives, the excipients, even contaminants all fit into the broader, obviously not intentionally added, the broader category of food chemicals. And so we already know that ingredients that are used in foods can show up in supplements. And so dietary supplements needs to be part of that conversation. We need to be integrated into the review. Now, having similar scientific expertise is really important. We then need to apply that use to the appropriate authority, right? So food additive review will continue to be applied to the food additive standard. And food additives, of course, are used in supplements, right? Titanium dioxide as a whitener is applied to the food additive standard. When that ingredient is showing up in supplements, that same science can be applied to the supplement safety standard, and that's absolutely appropriate. And I think that's an area where we'll be able to sort of leverage each other's expertise and overall improve the agency's activities with food and dietary supplement chemicals.
Awesome.
Or do we not like to refer to supplements as chemicals either?
Chemicals, I know, is food chemicals. We don't like to think that we're ingesting chemicals when we ingest food or supplements, but yeah,
we are working on some education about that.
I've heard. All good. Thank you.
Maybe food chemistry. People like the word chemistry more than the word chemicals.
Okay.
Just an idea.
Make a poll question.
It was not my decision.
Not mine either, but but we're the ones with the microphone, so hey. Yeah, a couple of and Larissa, jump in if you want. Otherwise, I'm going to keep going to the questions. They're coming in. I know you had some of the NDI stuff that.
Yeah, we are very short on time, so
Yeah.
I will just throw in
Please.
a couple questions on NDIs. It seems that the trade associations are in pretty good alignment on the NDI guidance. Most of them said pleased. It's progress. It's showing extensive scientific evidence. And you said 1,200-ish have been filed for new dietary ingredient notifications. So I was curious, in the short time we have left, with new dietary ingredient notifications and all the trademarked ingredients on the market, how do we encourage companies to go forward with the new dietary ingredient notification process, and how do you think the proprietary information will be protected with a new master file guidance? And encourage everyone out there to file your comments on the docket for that guidance related to IP.
Yeah, so again, there's no special authorities or protections applied to a master file program. And that's because we continue to be limited. Like, we are not at liberty to share information that is trade secret in CCI. And so I would say when a master file submission comes in, as well as a new dietary ingredient notification, it's really important for the notifier, who knows the most about that information, to identify what they think is trade secret or confidential commercial information. That's what it is, confidential commercial information. We do our review, and we sort of come to a conclusion, and then that information is redacted. I think I'm hopeful that the master file sort of plays into this broader aspect of building a framework where we can facilitate submission of notifications for a master file for the trademark ingredient, and then the products that are using that ingredient can rely on that master file. Ideally, it all sort of fits together. I understand that it is a long work in progress. I think that we're headed in the right direction. Always appreciate feedback, of course.
We're getting to our time here, There we are. We're getting to our time here. Can we put the QR code back up there again for people? That is, if you haven't done that, please do it. There's going to be at the very far right choice on your app screen there, there's a poll you can take to give us feedback about what you thought about the session. And then Del or Susan, is it possible to put up the poll results from those two polls real quick, just as we're heading out? I'd love to, I was looking at them as they were coming in on the app, but I'd love to just have those pop up there if we could. While we're waiting for that, please do fill out the survey. It helps us a lot as we try to figure out how to best serve this community. I want to definitely thank my panelists and Dr. Welch for being here. We can go on for hours, you know. We're not going to come to a resolution today, but I think especially for those in the market, I look out in the audience here and I see people I've known for decades that are there, and I see people I don't know. And the beauty of this market is that we have both. We have veterans who have been through the Deshay battles and the all that stuff going back, and then we have new people that have great ideas. This is their first trade show maybe, and they have an idea and they're trying to start a company or they're trying to get involved, and it's complicated. It's really complicated. The acronyms alone are tough. And I appreciate everyone spelling them out for people. But we asked a couple of questions. Here's the first one. Which of these statements do you agree with? And so the winner is FDA needs more tools to effectively regulate dietary supplements. So I think that's interesting. 73%. Almost half, 47%, say FDA needs more budget or funding to effectively regulate supplements. And then 25% say FDA has everything it needs to effectively regulate supplements. And then at 20%, FDA needs more authority. So when I look at that, and again, this is industry, it's not scientific, it's just a poll that we did. I think it's interesting. So it looks to me like the people here say that FDA should have more tools and should have more funding, but don't really need more authority. And then we'll be okay. And then we asked, do you believe an increase in collaboration between FDA and the dietary supplement industry would be a good thing? And I'm happy to say that 80% said yes, only 5%, oh, it just went down to 4.6%. Somebody changed it because they were embarrassed by their answer, said no. And 15% said they don't know, which is a perfectly fine answer. So I think the takeaway here is, if we focus on the consumer, which is what we're all focused on, whether they're a customer, they're a user of our products, it's a family member, or part of the citizenry that we're trying to protect as a government agency or office. If we focus on the consumer and all work toward that same idea that we can have an industry that provides high quality, safe products that help people stay healthy, then we'll get to the right place. So there's a lot to work out. But just the fact that we're sitting here talking about this stuff, I think it's a really good thing. And I want to thank FDA for taking the time to be here with us. It's not an easy crowd, right? It's just not. And it's not an easy job, but there's a lot more to do, and we all play a role in that, whether we're in industry, the agency, the media, the trade show business, whatever. So I'm an optimist. I think we'll continue to figure it out, and I want to thank all of you for being here, and thank Dr. Welch and our panel, Larissa and Russ, for being here too. Please enjoy the rest of the day here at SupplySide East.